Hey everyone, James with Lenspiration here, your source for family-friendly photography education. Today we're going to talk about hyperfocal distance, illustrated with this pond, a little rock, a medium-sized rock, and a big rock. What happens if I throw one of these rocks into the pond? Alright, so bingo, I throw it right dead center in the middle of the pond. What happens? You get ripples, right? Ripples come out from the little rock. But because it's a little rock, then the ripples only go so far, right? Okay, so let's say they go out that far. All right, so now what happens if I throw my medium-sized rock in here? Bingo, okay, you guessed it. You guys are really smart. So if I pull this out here like this, and now we've got ripples that go out even further. And then, of course, if you throw in the big rock, you're going to have splash. And now I get myself a gigantic ripples. Here we go. I've got all these ripples that go all the way further out. All right, where I throw the rock, that's where the ripples will begin. That's where I focus, and the end of the ripples will be how much of the picture is in focus. So, let's say I take the little rock, and we are going to take the little rock. Here we go. I think this is it. Yeah, okay, so the little rock. What happens if I throw it really close to the edge of the pond? Here's an incredible scene. We've got a flower in front, and we've got some mountains in the background. And if I throw the rock right over here, then only the foreground flower and maybe the little house in the foreground will be in focus. If I throw the rock all the way over here on the other side of the lake, then yes, the mountains are going to be in focus, but the little house and the flower and whatever I have in the foreground are going to be completely out of focus. So, instead of using a small rock with little bits of ripples, I want to use a large rock, which obviously will allow me to have more in focus. So, I have to focus out here, but still the mountains aren't going to be in focus, and over here still the flower's not going to be in focus. So where do I focus a picture so that I get the maximum focus possible? Okay, so let me hide my little rocks. What you want to do is most of the time you'll always want to use a large rock. Throw that rock in here. You want to focus a scene somewhere so that it will maximize how much of the scene's in focus. Now, if we have ourselves, let's have ourselves a photographer over here. Okay, pulled up my camera, and I'm photographing a leaf. Where do I focus so that the leaf and the mountains will be in focus? Do I throw the rock on top of the leaf? If I did that, then, well, you know, I might be able to get the leaf in focus, but you'd also have everything on the foreground in focus, and you'd have some middle ground in focus, but you wouldn't have anything in the background in focus. So you don't want to throw your rock right at the leaf, the closest element. You want to throw your rock somewhere beyond, somewhere out here, so that my leaf will be in focus and as much of the distance as possible can be in focus, okay? So this right here is my hyperfocal point. Wherever I focus, it's not going to be on the subject right in the foreground, because then I'm not going to get enough in focus in the background. My hyperfocal point is going to be as somewhere in the middle out here, so that the ripples will be in both directions in focus here in the foreground and focus here in the background. How do I know how far this hyperfocal distance is? It's kind of this mysterious number. Well, what I can do is I can use a special tool of thumb. Now write this down, because this is important. Whatever your closest object is, multiply that distance by 2. And that is your hyperfocal distance. If your subject is 2 or 3 feet away, then try focusing into the frame 5 or 6 feet into the scene. If your subject is 5 or 6 inches away, then your hyperfocal distance is going to have to be around 12 inches, something like that, about a foot. If you use that point to focus, and you use something like F11, then you'll get a big rock in the pond right about this point, and it will make your foreground subject in focus, and it will make the background in focus. So the reality when it comes to focus is not like ripples in a pond. It's more like something like this, where if you focus in one point, you have about a third of the scene in focus behind the focus point, the hyperfocal distance, and about 2/3 of the scene beyond. Okay, so if you're using f11, then it can reach off into the distance, but most of the time, most people are going to use something like f16 or f22 if they really want to get the leaf and the mountains out there to be in focus at the same time. That is what hyperfocal distance is, and there are two tools of thumb to be able to help you be able to focus properly a scene so that your closest subject and your farthest subject will be in focus. That's the hyperfocal distance, where you focus the focus point and start with f11 and then kind of do some experimenting with focus bracketing to make sure that you actually have the foreground and the background in focus. And a lot of times I'm bumping it up to f22, and if things are super close, like just like an inch or two away from the front of the lens, I'm going to actually have to do focus stacking, because there isn't actually an f-stop that would allow you to get that much in focus in one single picture. So now that you know what hyperfocal distance is, get out in the field and try it out. If you have any questions, feel free to ask on the Lenspiration Q&A forum. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned a lot. Keep learning with Lenspiration. We'll see you next time.